Hey everyone, my name is Carson, and I am the co-founder and creative director of Please Don't Kill Us.
Hey, and I'm Jack Dent. I am the chief story consultant at Please Don't Kill Us.
Jack is not only an incredible part of our team, but he is also an incredible dungeon master with literally thousands of hours.
Yeah, 4,000 hours.
4,000 hours of dungeon master experience.
Don't recommend it.
We're starting a new segment where he teaches us some of his tips and tricks, things that he has taught me, he's taught Eric, other people that are in the PDK universe, that have really helped us create amazing campaigns. And so he's going to share those things with you, and we're going to talk about them.
Yeah, so the first one of these is called the living hook. I always felt like adventure hooks were so like scary, and I felt like I was always failing at them. I was always like, every time that I was trying to execute, it would be like, it's a little bit awkward, the players obviously know what it is, etc. And it became this like okay, it was just came from like me trying to figure out, how do I deal with that, and how do I like reframe that so that it can be something helpful for me and not something that's like daunting and scary.
It's helped me so much throughout crafting campaigns. So I say, let's get into it.
Let's do it. The living hook. First of all, let's try and get a solid definition for a hook. Put simply, an adventure hook is a moment in an RPG where something happens which engages the party in the action of the adventure. In classical dramatic storytelling, the hook could also be defined as the adventure's inciting incident. But perhaps the clearest way to think about a hook is as an answer to the player question, what are we doing and why? In D&D's history, hooks weren't always a moment that occurred in-game. In earlier editions of the game, the hook was generally agreed upon prior to the session. Like, take the first standalone adventure, Palace of the Vampire Queen, where the backstory and its implicit hook were laid out entirely before the game began. But around 3rd and 4th edition, our modern idea of an adventure hook started to come into focus. Modern examples of hooks in 5th edition might be Curse of Strahd, where the players are locked in the mists of Barovia and must find a way to escape. Or Waterdeep Dragon Heist, where Volo gathers the party and asks them to find his missing friend in exchange for gold. So let's come back to our definition then. An adventure hook is a moment in an RPG where something happens that engages the party in the action of the adventure. So what do we mean by a moment where something happens? Well, it could be dozens of things. Attacked by goblins, like the Lost Mine of Phandelver, asked for help, like in Dragon Heist, or the list goes on. But I think that the easiest way to think about it is either action that is being taken to the players, or key information that the players receive that sets them on their path. To understand this, let's use Please Don't Kill Us Salem as one of our examples. If you haven't seen it, don't fret, I'll do a brief synopsis here, but you should go watch it, because it's a blast. Okay, so Please Don't Kill Us Salem follows a coven of witches from the town of South Peabody, who travel to the town of Salem to investigate the disappearance of a young girl. And along the way, they get caught up with Puritans, undead, and undead Puritans. So in Salem, the opening adventure hook comes from key information provided by the Black Cat Reaper. Here, Reaper tells the party that a young girl, Honesty, is missing in Salem, and that another girl, Annabelle, has been imprisoned, accused of being responsible for Honesty's disappearance through witchcraft. So now we have our key information. Let's see how that key information becomes an adventure hook. So every hook is made up of 2 elements, the verb and the stakes. The verb is what the hook is compelling the players to do, and the stakes is why they are compelled to do it. So in the case of Salem, the verb in this opening hook is investigate, since the party is told to solve the mystery of what happened to the young girl. And the stakes involve a couple of different factors. One is that the missing girl or other young girls might be in danger. 2, a young woman has been imprisoned, and probably wrongfully, so an innocent person may be burned at the stake. And 3, the party themselves are mostly witches, so they likely feel an innate desire to protect women being accused of witchcraft. So with these verbs and stakes acknowledged, we can craft a hook statement, which can be stated as, investigate the disappearance of Honesty Wheelwright, or else Annabelle and other women may be in danger of death and persecution. Alright, so now we have our hook statement. But in turning this into a proper tool, we have to ask what the verb and the stakes imply, so that we can better understand how they might impact the player's actions. So from a game design perspective, the verb and the stakes can be interpreted as an expression of 2 spectrums, a spectrum of linearity and a spectrum of urgency. The verb helps us define how linear the upcoming events will be. In the case of Salem's initial hook, Investigate implies a degree of non-linearity. The players can travel, ask around, follow leads, put the pieces together, and this creates a very different feeling from a verb like slay or chase, which implies a clear, direct course of action toward a known entity. And then the stakes can define how urgent the task at hand really is. In Salem, the stakes lie somewhere in the middle to begin. On one hand, real lives are at stake, so the implication is that the party should act soon or people could die. But on the other hand, there's no set timeline or immediate threat that the players are aware of, which gives them some room to maneuver without feeling totally aimless. And this is clearly a different feeling from a lower stakes scenario, like payment for delivering goods, or a higher stakes scenario like the dragon will burn the town. After figuring out where on each of these spectrums our verbs and stakes can be found, we can chart the relationship between the linearity of the verb and the urgency of the stakes to figure out how we expect the players to respond to our hook statements. So in any given adventure, we can use this verb stakes approach with its linearity and urgency analysis to examine our hooks. So one of the benefits to the verb stakes analysis is how it allows the DM to unify the party under one banner, the verb, while being able to personalize the stakes to each individual party member. Many DMs out there know the tricky balance of engaging each different player's character. Some of these characters might have wildly different backstories, wildly different reasons for adventuring. Like in the case of Salem, Marjorie expresses apprehension and doesn't care much for the safety of the girls in Salem, but eventually is convinced to help in exchange for safety for her goat. You can see here how personalization of the stakes can help satisfy disparate players' desires without trying to give party members conflicting verbs, which would send them in different directions. By now you might be thinking, alright, this is all well and good, but what happens when the verbs and the stakes change? And you're right, it's rare that the opening hook defines all of the action for the rest of the adventure. So how does our analysis account for what happens when the hook statement changes? Well, first of all, we need to identify when our hook statement changes. Just like before, things will change when the players either discover key information or when action is taken upon them. An example in Salem is when later on in the adventure, Marjorie uses a detect thoughts spell on another young girl, Virtue, and discovers that there are demonic voices living inside of her head. We can call a moment like this a plot point, where a new event or new information changes the trajectory of the adventure. And how do we see how that trajectory changes? Well, by taking this new information and re-examining our hook statement. So our original hook statement for Salem was, investigate the disappearance of Honesty Wheelwright, or else Annabelle and other women may be in danger of death and persecution. But with the discovery of demonic voices inside Virtue's head, the hook statement may become, investigate the disappearance of Honesty and its relationship to the possession of Virtue, or else innocent women may be persecuted and demons may be let loose on the town. So now in this particular instance, the party has two kind of related objectives, one involving the disappearance of Honesty, the other involving the possession of Virtue. So there's a chance you might want to write them as two separate sentences. But in either case, the verb here is essentially unchanged. You are still investigating, but the stakes have been significantly raised, and they are that much closer to their initial goal. Putting all this together, I think that we might actually have a new perspective on how we can approach adventure structure. So we start by identifying the opening hook and writing the hook statement with the verb and the stakes that it implies. Then we identify each moment where new information is learned or a new event takes place. And then we write how our hook statement evolves at each point. I call this approach the living hook. And here's an example of how one of these diagrams could be applied to Salem. What I love about thinking of an adventure on these terms is how it combines many elements of adventure design together. It gives you a structural breakdown of the adventure, but it's written from the perspective of the players, since the hook statement is essentially just an expression of what the players are set off to do. And so, because of that expression, you have at any given moment a snapshot of what the adventure feels like from the player's perspective, which gives you, the DM, the power to modulate the linearity of the adventure, either by introducing new information or an event happening to the players that can either increase or decrease the urgency of the scenario. Through these functions, if you as a Dungeon Master ever feel lost, a living hook can give you a reminder of the adventure and help you chart out the next steps with a greater sense of clarity. hooks in adventure design can often feel very daunting, full of pressure to engage the players, fear that if it goes wrong, the whole adventure could just derail. And with this approach, my hope is that some of that pressure is relieved, and that what we're left with is just a helpful organizing tool to structure our adventures. And so then we have even more time to do the joyful, detailed work that really brings a D&D game to life. And along the way, we hook the players at every step of the journey.
Okay, so what... I mean, this was mind-blowing for me when crafting. I DM'd Salem, and Jack was such a help on talking about those verbs and stakes. It was so helpful for me.
What the graph implies is more helpful than the graph itself, in my opinion.
I disagree.
Oh, really?
Continue.
Okay, well, because I was going to say, like, this to me is probably the most helpful thing about a verb stakes analysis, is that it gives you, like, if I'm ever confused about why the players aren't acting the way that I want them to, or not acting a way, like, or
They
like...
expected them
they
to.
expected them to, yeah. Who cares what I want? But, like, I can go to their verb and go, like, okay, well, of course they're thinking that, because they have they don't have a sense of what action they're being compelled to do, and there's no reason that's making them do it.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about the graph for me, and why I think the graph, actually plotting out the graph, is really interesting to me. It's such a great tool to, like, physically see on a graph. Okay, I have something that's low urgency and maybe low stakes. I have something that's low urgency and high stakes. Okay, I need something that's high urgency. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
yes.
And then that you have a building block to then be like, okay, think of only things that are high urgency. Yeah. Right? And then you can start to pare down and create a really three-dimensional adventure. And I think if you have little tiny points on all of those quadrants, it means that their choice, no matter what direction they go in, they will be making a choice that you understand and that you have filled out, which I think is awesome, you know?
It'd be cool to find a way to linearly chart that for beginning to end of the adventure, so you can see where, like, plot point 1's here, 2 is here, we go there, okay, now we need to go down to here, like, something like that could be a helpful tool.
Yeah, it seems like such basic advice, but the advice that, like, everywhere they go, something should be happening.
Totally.
I needed to hear.
Yeah, it's a great...
I needed to hear. Well, because I would find myself being like, I want them to discover this. You in this, you talk about how you can deliver information to the players, or they could find it themselves.
Yeah, it's like something that happens to them or something that they discover, basically.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I was stuck in having them discover, right? And so I'd be like, you're in this room and it's a basic room, right? And then they'd be like, okay, well, what now? You know, and there's always a new hook you can you can put in there to get them in movement.
100%. This is essentially like me taking my understanding of, like, storytelling and story structure and trying to apply it to something that's interactive, like an adventure, right? And, like, this, like, reflects my personal perspective on story structure, which I just think is true, which is that it is a tool. It's not going to be, it's also not perfect, right? Like, no adventure is going to have a linear chain of even variable hooks like the living hook is, right? It's not going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's going to go from 1, and then we're going to come over here, and there's going to be, you know, someone shooting the Massachusetts frog person at Ashby's farm, right? Or, like, and then I actually think, like, going on right now, Light of Xerxes
and
is super
it's more compelling. Yeah, sorry.
It is more compelling. And, like, looking at, like, Xerxes, right, is, like, a great example of, like, bam, episode 1, crazy shit comes up from the ground, right? And, like, we have no idea why. We actually have no idea even the, like, longer, wider implications of that danger. But we know, oh shit, something's happening. We need to get the heck out of here, right? And then immediately the hook there, the verb is get out, right? And the stakes are, or we're gonna die, right? But what's brilliant about that is that once you've gotten out, those stakes are gone.
Yeah.
For you personally, right? They're still there lingering for the adventure, which is great, because then when you now in the second episode learn new information, now we have a place to go, we have a problem to solve, right? But that, like, you watch, like, that first hook in there is really strong. Yeah. Because it gives you a linear thing to do and a high stakes thing to do it, and then it opens it up. Yeah.
And if you haven't watched Spelljammer Light of Xerxes, we're playing it right now, currently. I don't know when you're watching this, but it's currently on right now, and it is so incredible. I'm having such a blast.
Yeah, Eric is amazing. It's such a cool adventure. Yeah, highly recommend. Yeah.
Jack, thank you so much.
This
is like literally, I'm like so overjoyed, because something that I have been inspired by so long, which is the living hook, but also just all your thoughts on DMing. I'm so happy to have a avenue to share those now.
Well,
And you're the best.
I love you. This is
I
very
love
sweet.
you.
This is
And
so...
we're end with a hug.
End with a hug.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
If you aren't subscribed, please subscribe and watch Spelljammer
Yes.
if you're watching this as this video comes out. If not, watch whatever we're doing. We're always doing awesome stuff all
Thursday,
the time.
Thursday. Check
Yeah,
it out.
unless that changes. But as of now, Thursday. All right, bye.
Love you. Bye.